you've had some cool cars over the years. I mean, is there a dream classic that if you could, you'd get it,
I
or
mean,
top three?
that's kind of like, that would be difficult. Of course, I like the Hemi Cudas. I like a nice, vintage, Stingray or Corvette. Of course, I can't say I'm particularly just partial to Mustangs, but of course that's what I grew up on. So,
Sure.
a Mustang. But I mean, I would throw in there, I like the trucks too. I mean, you can't really just pick one. I mean, it's just, if I had to do top three, I'd say, a Mopar, probably a Stingray or something similar, and some type of Mustang, and in any
Sure.
order, in any order.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because, kind of like what you said with cars, like when you're growing up and you see them every day, they're just kind of throwaway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get older, and then you kind of see them and they're getting restored, or they're unrestored and they look fantastic, and you're like, oh man, yeah, that was kind of a cool design. And so starting to see that now with like the square bodies are so popular, square
Mm-hmm.
body pickup trucks. Some of the 80s cars are starting to come into their own. That era of collector is starting to, just pick up some steam, and it's really cool to kind of see that happen. Are you noticing that, like, from the era where the cars were just throwaways for you, and now they're kind of just coming around?
Well, I think if you're looking, I think it's cyclical. When the throwaway, we'll call them that, the throwaway vehicles or trucks, when the drivers get of age, 16, 18, 20 years old, they're looking for things that are probably close to 20 years old already,
Yeah.
So, I'd see a lot of like Nissans, and, they were called Datsuns way back when.
Right. Right.
But you'd see those. You don't see. I see a lot of Fox body Mustangs.
Yeah.
That the things that are, I guess, in relative terms, are affordable now. That's what you're seeing. And like I said, I think it comes in waves. So I think what you'll see is coming up is the Chargers and the Challengers, and to some extent the Mustangs, the Camaro. They stopped making the Camaro, but I think you'll start seeing those start rising again because they're out there, and that's what we're going to call it. The next generation will be looking at.
Yeah.
And when the trucks, I remember when trucks, if you couldn't buy a car, you bought a truck because you can always afford a truck. And now, I mean, it's
Now it's
like
the opposite.
yeah, it's like buying a house.
Right.
Yeah.
I just saw an Avalanche, so that would have been the early 2000s, with like super low miles. It sold more than it did brand new. Like I just saw the article come out today. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think we're into to see that as well with the used cars. I think they'll keep jumping up, and that's gonna affect all the collectors as well. But
Yeah.
I think that window. I'm not going to say it's closing, but I'm going to say it's getting a little skinnier because the population that has that income now that they can purchase those things. Their kids are grown and gone, or they own their homes, or they're nearing retirement age. They have that income now that they can say, I always wanted these and could never
Sure.
afford it. So, that's what they're going to do. But yeah, like I said, it's cyclical. That's what's happening.
Yeah. So in college, I had an '89 Honda CRX SI 5-speed, and I just saw one sold at Mecum here in Kissimmee. It was like, I don't know, 30 grand or something like that. It was bananas, and I think I sold mine for 3,500, which at the time was crazy.
Sure.
I sold it to a mechanic who worked on Terry Labonte's race car in NASCAR. He goes, if you can drive it up here, I'll give you full price. I was like, I'll see you in 2 days. But that's like, for me, I would never go seek that car out. You know what I mean? It's just,
Right.
it was what it was at the time, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh yeah, I had that car, but I'll never go seek that out, except for the fact that they're so small. You could probably stack about 15 of them in your garage if you wanted to. That's nice.
You went small. I remember a road trip in the back of an RX-7 where I had to lean over because your head was hitting that that big piece of glass in the back, and that's they say, oh yeah, you can fit 4, but I think only the 2 in the front could actually breathe. The ones in the back, you don't want to take a long road trip in one of those.
They didn't say anything about comfort. They just said you can fit 4, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
This is probably a tough one to answer, but like, is there a car that has that sound that's like unmistakable to you? That's just like, man, that is the best sounding car around.
I don't know if I can just select one. I being one that you think about like a classic car, you like that nice sound of the cam, that loping sound. It doesn't have to sound like a NASCAR, but it has to sound like, okay, if I'm going to stomp on the go pedal, it's going to mean business, or at least it's going to sound like it means business.
Right.
So that, I think that's what I'm more geared to, but I can tell you that I thought it was that deep sound of a muscle car until I had, opportunities to experience, like a McLaren or a Ford GT or, the new Corvette. They all have individual sounds, and every one of them it just kind of is like, I know exactly what that car is now just by hearing the sound of it. So, those are a lot of fun too.
I was just at the Rolex 24, and in the GT class, when the Ferraris came around, they had something in the aerodynamics of the car. It sounded like a TIE fighter from Star Wars. It was just the coolest thing. I mean, I love the V8s of the Mustangs and the Corvettes, but it was just so neat to hear that thing coming, because I mean, you knew every time when you heard it, they were on the way.
Right. That
was pretty neat. It was very distinguishable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's for sure. That's for you. Yeah. The poor man's way is to put one of those little. I don't know if do you remember they said it would chase away deer if you put it on the front bumper, and it would make like this whistling sound on the front. We don't have many deer problems down here in Florida, but no. Yeah, you can do that too. It's kind of like putting the old playing cards in the spokes of your bicycle.
Right.
It's but that's right. Hey, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah. Well, I had a Tacoma that I screwed the front end of it up, but I was able to get it positioned back, but I was never the integrity of it I'd screwed up. And so every time you got above about 75 miles an hour, it would just start whistling. Oh, it drove me crazy. So, I basically got that whistle thing that you're talking about for free because I screwed the car up. But that was a mess. Yeah. It drove me absolutely bonkers. Okay. So do you have an unpopular opinion about a car? Like, the certain year of certain car that everybody loves, and you're like, it's not that great.
Well, that's kind of hard to say. That's a tough question. I don't really know that I have one of those. I think I have more of an opinion of what people think things are worth or
good
but
call. Yeah.
I like them. I like all the cars. See, some of them just aren't for me, but I think they all have a place. But if your question's about what they're worth, that's a sticky wicket. It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it, as I say, which is kind of a cop out answer. But
no, you're right though.
It's but I think the thing is when you see things on television versus seeing it at, Bob's Used Cars down at the corner, it's, why is this car on television worth $100,000 and this one down here is, this one's $12,000, although they're going to try to sell it for $100 because it's only worth $12. But, I think, that you see those things and it inflates things quite a bit. And then, you think you have something that, and you have something that's worth something to you, but maybe it's not worth something to the next person. So it falls back to that, what they're willing to pay. That's really what it's worth. And that's really the end of the story.
For sure. I remember, I had a 59 Bel Air, and I just moved. I'd moved from one house to another here in town. And I was like, I'm just going to get rid of it because, I was unsure about, how things were going to go or whatever. And so there was this guy, and he was going to help me get it into Mecum because it was a last minute deal. And Mecum was like 3 weeks away or whatever. And so he's like, what do you want for it? And I was like, I want X, but, it's probably too much or whatever. And he goes, well, we all want too much money for these things.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
We do. I mean, rarely you get somebody being like, I'm going to be realistic here and ask for X, but most of the time guys want, through the moon money.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, oftentimes they're selling their memories, which is where their value is, not necessarily in the vehicle itself. Whereas often you have, like a broker or somebody that's 100%, they have no investment other than monetary in a vehicle. So that's what they're trying to capitalize on. But, I think I wrote a story about this, you can't buy our memories. So, and don't ask somebody to invest in yours. So,
I was thinking about it the other day because, I've got cars in my shop, and I'm like, and I look at them and I think, okay, there's no way I'm getting rid of that one because of X, and there's no way I'm getting rid of that. And now I look at the other ones, and like, I like them and I enjoy them, but I'd be fine to let them go, Mm-hmm. But the ones that have those memories and like, you're right. Like I'm just not letting them go. And Chip Foose offered to buy, my family's 59 Impala. It was at a car show in Disney Springs, like 15 years ago. And he was like, do you want to sell this car? And I was like, nope. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And then someone asked me, they're like, well, did you ask him what he would pay? I said, I didn't want to know. I didn't even want to know. I just said no and moved along. So,
yeah. So you can't buy memories. So, it's like when people say, hey, if I had that car, I would drive the wheels off it. I wouldn't put it away. I wouldn't do these things. And, if you're driving this car, let's say you've got a Chevelle, and they'd say, okay, I would drive the wheels off that, but I can't replace it. Oh yeah, you can. There's a million of them out there. You can go buy another one. Yeah, but you can't buy this one. This is the one I worked on with my dad or my brother, or, was handed down. This, at the end of the day, people aren't paying for that. There's no monetary value in that form, but that's what makes it so hard to sell them sometimes.
Right. No, exactly. 100%.